Okay, so first, Intel shocked everyone with their Core Ultra 7 270K and Ultra 5 250K, but AMD just fired back with the Ryzen 9 9950X3D2 dual V-cache CPU that looks to dominate gaming and creator work. How do these CPUs stack up against each other, and should you consider either one for your next PC builder upgrade? Welcome back to PC Builder, I'm Jason. We're going to dive into AMD's announcement for the Ryzen 9950X3D2, Intel's new CPUs, and we're going to take your questions, including on the current state of the GPU market, whether you should be buying now or waiting. If you get value out of this video, please give it a like and of course subscribe for more cool PC content. Let's jump into it. This video is sponsored by Meter, the company building better networks. Is your business struggling with networking? Unable to scale and manage for your needs? You should check out Meter. Meter builds out full stack networking solutions that actually work for business. That's because they manage every aspect. Meter designs the hardware, they write the firmware, and they build the software. So it all works together. And Meter's networking solutions are built to give you maximum control with deep visibility, policy level control, and ongoing support, and all at a price that works for your business. If you're ready to offload your networking headaches to a trusted partner, go to meter.com/PCBuilder to book a demo now, or click the link in the video description. All right, let's jump into the news before we get to the Q&A, because AMD just announced the Ryzen 9950X3D2. So I want to get you the details and some of my thoughts on it as well. This is going to be a dual V-cache version of the 9950X3D, which, as you recall, has two CCDs, 16 total cores, 8 cores on each CCD, but only one of those has V-cache on it. And when it games, it basically turns off one of the CCDs without the V-cache, and it games like a 9800X3D. And then when you do multi-threaded stuff, DaVinci Resolve or any kind of video editing or higher end workloads, it turns the CCD back on and you get all of that together. In some benchmarks, you can see the 9950X, not the X3D, does lose out a little bit to the 9950X3D in some of the more memory sensitive applications out there. So we do see some benefit from that V-cache even in productivity workloads. But a lot of people are like, well, why don't they just put V-cache on both the CCDs? So that's what's happening right now. Let's go through the specs of this. Launching on April 22nd, no pricing given just yet. Just note that the 9950X3D currently sells for $675, although we do have the Intel Core Ultra launch. AMD dropped this on top of the actual retail launch, the 270K and the 250K, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And the reason they did this, obviously, they want to step on Intel's thunder, but I am noticing CPU price cuts across the board. So it will be interesting to see if they price the 9950X3D2 either a little bit higher than the 9950X3D, or if they just decide to cut some prices out there, because Intel is making a pretty strong value argument, as we'll get to in just a moment. What's the big deal about the 9950X3D2? What's the changes from the 9950X3D? Well, the 9950X3D, which is right here, boosts up to 5.7 gigahertz and has a TDP of 170 watts down here way at the bottom. Well, the 9950X3D, on the other hand, is going to boost up to 5.6 gigahertz. So it's actually 100 megahertz slower than 9950X3D. And it has a TDP of 200 watts. That's 30 watts more. Remember, TDP does not equate directly into power. It's some complicated formula that AMD uses that doesn't even use power, but we know that it's going to draw more power basically. I suspect, because we're not seeing the boost clock any higher, in fact, we're seeing it a little bit lower, that power is going to power the V-cache on the second CCD and not necessarily giving us additional performance in terms of clock speeds. Again, the CCD itself having V-cache on it is going to give some additional performance. All right, let's jump into AMD's performance claims. The usual caveats here about first-party data apply. Take this with a grain of salt until we get third-party benchmarks. Remember, this is AMD's possibly cherry-picked data. Now, it's interesting they're making no gaming claims whatsoever on this. They're not showing any slides for it. I suspect that means we're not going to get any gaming increase, even with the dual V-cache CCDs. In terms of creator workloads, they're basically projecting anywhere from a 7 to a 13% uplift, depending on what you're doing in rendering, content creation, AI simulation. I know we all don't love that stuff, and then compilation, Unreal Engine and things like that. So for creators, it does look like there's at least a small amount of boost to it. Okay, so what are my overall thoughts on the 9950X3D2 versus the 9950X3D versus should you wait for Zen 6 versus the 270K that we just got? And by the way, I just found out on launch day here that the 270K is actually $20 more than $299. So it's $319, and the KF version is the $299 one. I think that's a little deceptive, Intel, by the way. I really think you should have stuck with $299, and then the KF version without the integrated GPU should be $20 cheaper. So $279, and vis-a-vis for the $250K also, I think you're just missing the value mark a little bit there. It's like they want to get aggressive, but they're not getting aggressive enough. And we'll talk more about their performance in just a moment. 9950X3D2 for super high-end creators and gamers that don't want to wait for 3D V-Cache Zen 6 CPUs, which we don't really expect to get in 2026. We still are kind of expecting to get Zen 6 desktop non-X3D CPUs late in 2026, although that could slip to 2027. Then typically there's a gap of at least a couple months between the non-X3D parts and then getting the X3D parts. I would then anticipate at CES in 2027, which happens in January, we'll get an announcement for the X3D parts for Zen 6. But who knows, with the memory market being the way it is, although DDR5 and DDR4 prices are coming down, which is really, really nice. Fingers crossed that continues right now, and we see the memory market start to heal itself. Overall, I got to tell you, this is probably for those who don't want to wait a year to a year and a half to get Zen 6 X3D. Not that you can't upgrade to Zen 6 X3D, of course, on the AM5 platform, and who want to spend all the money to get the best of the best of the best. In terms of its competition with the 9950 X3D, I don't know is it's going to be competitive enough with the 9950 X3D to necessarily justify a huge price premium over it. I think like the 9850 X3D, small price premium over it. And then probably the 9950 X3D may even get slightly discounted, and it might come down a little bit. It might become more of an option for folks down there. The 270K Plus, I think, is the option for people who are more want that super solid value, because if you look at it, yeah, the value is really there compared to a super high-end part like the 9950 X3D. All right, did Intel with their new Core Ultra 200S Plus CPUs, gotta fix that naming, just beat AMD? That's what a lot of people want to know. Did Intel just beat AMD? And should you be considering these CPUs if you're going to put together a new gaming PC in 2026? That's what Riff Raff Jonesy wants to know. Top questions gotta be about the new Intel Plus CPUs. 6 true cores and 12, I think you mean E-cores. Total of 18 pseudo-ish cores for $200. That's the Ultra 5 250K Plus for $199. I'd love to see your brief on this in a Q&A, do a deep dive. They haven't bought a CPU from Intel in quite a long time, and they're feeling like AMD is extracting what they call a red tax right now, which Intel used to do with the blue tax, right? When AMD was struggling. So let's quickly go through the specs here. We've got the Intel Core Ultra 5 250K Plus CPU, which is $199. And it basically replaces the 245K, which they had a lot of problems with when they launched it about 2 years ago. And then we've got the Intel Core Ultra 7 270K Plus. These names, Intel, come on, you got to do better than this. This is a little too long. Which replaces the 265K. Now, here's the thing. These CPUs on their own, if we don't consider upgrade path or anything else, these CPUs are very competitive with the Ryzen lineup right now. For the 250K Plus, it games like a 9600X. If you want the benchmarks, I've looked through them all. It games basically like a 9600X, which you can pick up right now for about $185, $190. So very price competitive. At the same time, it does production like something between either a 9800 X3D up to a 9900X, and it depends on the application. And that's a $199 CPU. That's pretty crazy. The 27K, the Ultra 7 27K Plus, basically games somewhat similar gaming performance to a 9700X, maybe even slightly faster than a 9700X at times. Doesn't touch the X3D CPUs, I think, obviously. And at the same time, it basically blows everything else except the 9950X and 9950X3D out of the water in terms of production work. And it costs $299, and those two Ryzen CPUs I just named are like $520 and $650. So yeah, I mean, Intel seems to be getting much more aggressive. I don't want to get too much into the weeds with why I think Arrow Lake was broken. It basically had to do with the fact that they went to a new tile-based architecture. It's their version of chiplets. Remember, AMD went to chiplets back in with Ryzen 1000. where they're like, hey, we're going to design a CPU that you can just plug these chiplets in, and they have a certain amount of cores on each of the core complex dies, and we can either do 6 cores or 8 cores or 12 cores and eventually 16 cores. And Intel really had, because they were still doing monolithic, which is much more expensive, they had no answer, because AMD, despite the fact that AMD's gaming performance on the 1000 and 2000 and even 3000 series wasn't as good as Intel's, they were able to offer way more cores, and they were able to leapfrog Intel in terms of any kind of real production work. Because remember, Intel was just drip feeding people 4 cores, 4 threads. That's it. Oh no, 4 cores and 8 threads now. It's like, I still feel like a 4-core CPU. Maybe we need more power than that. So AMD was able to make some inroads there because there was a real critical need for more powerful CPUs on a desktop platform, not a HEDT or like a server platform, but like an actual desktop consumer platform to be able to do things that weren't just gaming out there. And Intel was just basically ignoring the market, saying, hey, we control everything, so tough. I feel like in 2026, unfortunately for Intel, while their CPUs perform really, really well, I think that there's not necessarily the crying need right now for more raw compute out there. So we don't just need more cores and more threads in 2026. We've already got a lot of cores and threads comparatively, and they're able to handle this production work. I feel like CPU progress is really leapfrogged. So I really feel like Intel's equation here has to be offering better value than AMD. And I think the one area that they're just going to get beaten up right now is the fact that this is a quote unquote dead platform. Now, here's what I mean by that. Basically, if you buy a LGA 1851 motherboard, that's it. That's the end of this motherboard. Yeah, if you go to a 250K, maybe you'll upgrade to a 270K in the future. I don't know why you would do that, but there's not going to be another generation of CPUs that we can foresee. It's possible that they'll backport something, or they'll offer like another CPU that's similar in architecture that's tuned up a little bit more than this. But honestly, without that future upgradability, when you go to upgrade your system in a couple of years, you're going to need an entirely new motherboard. You know, you reuse the RAM, but that's the advantage that AMD has. So if you, especially for production users, you go out and buy a $300 or $400 motherboard that's, you know, got like a ton of M.2s on it, really higher end features, and then you're like, oh, okay, well that investment is now defunct. Now, if you're buying like a really cheap motherboard, like a $100 motherboard, maybe the upgrade path isn't that important, but I do know that people at least like the idea. Let's not even talk about the physical value. They like the idea that in the future, I'm putting together this with an ultra cheap motherboard and a Ryzen 7500F, and one day I'm gonna drop in a 9800X3D in that thing, or 9850X3D, or Zen 6X3D. Like, just that idea is powerful, and it makes people feel better about their system. So there's something to that has value. How you feel about your system has value. Like, well, otherwise, why would we do all this aesthetic stuff, right? We would just have these ugly little boxes sitting next to us, and some people like the ugly box. So there is something to this idea that how people feel about their gaming PC build or their PC build in general is important to them, and they're willing to spend money on that. And we can sit here and judge that all day long, but that doesn't change the mechanics of the market. And so Intel really needs to take a step back, and like with Nova Lake, we've heard that they are going to support Nova Lake CPUs that we're expecting to come out later this year for many, many years to come, multiple upgrades on that, and that they're finally getting it. I don't understand why it took them this long, and I honestly don't understand why Nova Lake couldn't use LGA 1851 motherboards, which is the motherboards that they're on right now. Why do they have to have a new set of motherboards? So I think that's Intel's big challenge right now. And I don't feel like they satisfied it. So I think they have to really lean into value. And I'd love to see the price of those CPUs come down at least $50. I think the Ultra 7 270K plus should have been $249. $229 would have been a better price, by the way, Intel. Because you have to win the market back at this point, and you can't offer socket upgrades. So what do? You have to offer better initial value that overcomes any future value of that, right? So then the big question is, should you be looking at buying either one of these CPUs if you're building a new gaming system in 2026? I think it's tough for gaming to make the argument. I think Ryzen is still so much better. Not only is it better value economically, but you have future upgradability. So Intel didn't cut prices deep enough. If you're a hybrid user where you're actually a professional, because A 9600X is plenty powerful for video editing for most amateurs out there. Really need heavier duty application stuff to pick up something like 250K plus for both gaming and production. If you're just solely production, don't care about gaming, 250K plus will get you a relatively powerful system, relatively cheap. But I would actually go ahead and then spend like an extra $100 and get the 270K plus, because that $100 you're investing right now is going to pay dividends in the future, and the system's probably going to last longer. You're going to at least feel like you can use it for longer. So that's another reason. So the 250K plus, to me, it's a tough argument unless they cut the price, which I think they eventually will do. The 270K plus, I think, is the real winner here if you're a production user. All right, Kian wants to know what's the best $300 to $400 GPU right now. They've got a Ryzen 5600G. They're looking for either new or used. They want to do high 144-ish FPS, 1080p games like Call of Duty Warzone. So this is a big question right now, right? Well, like, what's the best GPU between $300 and $400? Because I would have been able to give you a very easy answer in 2025. The answer in 2026 is very, very difficult. I know you want to do Call of Duty Warzone, and we can get into that. Maybe an 8GB GPU is fine for you. I would have said an RX 9060 XT 16GB, which you could have picked up last year for $349, but right now is going to cost you closer to $440 for some of the cheapest models out there. Although it does look like GPU prices are, at least on the AMD side, are coming down a little bit. I've noticed that, for instance, the 9070 XT pricing has come down $20 or $30 here in the last week. So that, fingers crossed that we're kind of ebbing over whatever just happened in October started in October of last year and kind of really smacked us in the face with the RAM and SSD prices. I'm hoping that things are starting to smooth over a little bit. We're going to see prices on the long term go down. But if you want a new GPU right now because you want to play Call of Duty Warzone, I mean, I think that, number one, if I recall correctly, that Radeon GPUs tend to perform slightly better than NVIDIA GPUs, although obviously it's patch to patch, driver to driver, that can always change, and I may not have looked at the latest benchmarks on that, but historically, Radeon GPUs have been better. But for $400 right now, what are you going to get if $400 is like a hard cap? Arc B580 for about $290. You could go even cheaper to an Arc B570, 10GB GPU. Those will give you pretty good performance in something like Call of Duty. However, with the 5600G, you're going to be slightly CPU bottlenecked, and especially if you're the kind of player you are, maybe you want to look at getting like an RTX 5060 or 9060 XT 8GB GPU, or 5060 Ti 8GB. But even those, I think you're spending $350 or almost $400 for the 8GB versions of those graphics cards. So it is tough. There's the RTX 5050 that you could certainly look at. It's not the worst GPU in the world. DLSS 4 looks pretty good. So it's definitely something you could consider, but it is a challenge right now. And I think until we see memory prices start to ebb down and GPU prices probably follow on, right now it's going to be either an 8 or 12GB GPU. If you're hard stuck in those price categories, I would urge you to find another $50 and jump up to a 9060 XT 16GB, because I think you're going to be way better long-term. But I get it. Some people just don't have the money. So if you can't do that, yes, I would consider an Arc B580 12GB, RTX 5050 8GB, 5060 8GB, or 9060 XT 8GB. Probably leaning towards 9060 XT 8GB if you're kind of hard stuck. All right, Mr. Bear just abandoned me because his automatic feeder just went off. Jay Sukram wants to know, they can spend around $700, $800 on a GPU. They've got an i5 12400F, 32GB DDR5, 6000 CL36. So you actually have DDR5 RAM on 12400F. So it's actually better. Your monitor's 1440p, 165 Hz. What should you get? They play games like Helldivers, Arc Raiders, fighting games, other shooters, and competitive titles. They've been looking at the Sapphire Nitro Plus on Newegg. Don't roast me, a 5070 FE Founders Editions, because they really like the aesthetics. And are they dumb for even considering a weaker RTX 5070? Not necessarily. I mean, listen, I think we just talked probably earlier in this video about how important aesthetics can be and how important other things can be, like future upgrade path. How you feel about your PC is very important. What are they worth? It's going to depend on what they're worth to you. If you can spend $700 to $800 on a GPU, I would recommend getting an RX 9070 XT. For the simple reason that there's no game a 5070 is going to be able to beat it. And you got 16 gigs of VRAM. And I know it looks pretty, but there's a lot of nice looking 9070 XTs that I think you can also use. I've always wondered why we don't have at least one AMD GPU maker that invests in making GPUs that look like more Founder Edition style cards, that kind of metal black matte finish, maybe with the dual fans on it. I don't know if NVIDIA has like a patent on their design or something that you can't even make it somewhat look like their cards, or you're gonna get sued. Maybe it's because they sell a lower volume, so they're just like, they've got to hit this kind of more mainstream market segment, and they don't have as much wiggle room to kind of create more niche products out there. It's a little bit too bad because I really do like the aesthetics of the Founders Edition. Doug wants to know, there's only one question that needs to be asked. How's Mr. Bear doing? I hope he's feeling okay. Well, he's still eating his lunch, so I'm filming this right here. So Mr. Bear, if you don't follow us, Mr. Bear had to go to the emergency vet over the weekend. It was a really big challenge because number one, he's 12 years old. We got him when he was about a year and a half. So we don't know his exact birth date, but we believe he's 12 years old. And for those pet parents out there, you know that that's not a young pet. And we are tracking his health all the time, just to kind of make sure, we're giving him senior cat food and things like that. And hopefully he's here for a long time. But unfortunately, he picked up a little bit of a gastrointestinal issue. And what makes him particularly difficult is that he broke his leg when he was like a year old, or actually 2 years old, and we had to have surgery on the leg. And as a result, he hates the vet. Massive PTSD. He used to love going to the vet. He used to be everyone's friend. Now he goes in there and it's like, you can just see he just goes into war mode, and he's a big cat. He's 16 pounds now. He's been up to 20 pounds at times when he was a little bit younger and kind of had a little bit more muscle mass on him, but he's huge. And our vet actually said that he's one of the most difficult cats that they've ever worked with, because he goes into this deep PTSD mode. So we're very judicious about when we go into the vet with him, because we don't want to stress him out and we don't want to put extra pressure on him. So he had this issue. And then on Sunday, it seemed like he was getting better. He was eating fine. And then on Sunday, he just didn't even want to get out of bed basically for food, which is way unlike him. He basically will just eat and eat and eat and eat. So we had to take him to the emergency vet, and they were wonderful because our normal vet wasn't open. Of course, it's Sunday morning. Of course, this stuff only ever happens when your regular vet isn't open, right? So we had to go to the emergency vet all the way across town. It's like a 20-minute drive. Took him in, and they did blood tests and everything else with him, and they have to sedate him, which is a challenge. What we did find out about it is that in addition to the GI issue, or maybe because of this, he had the GI issue, he got bit or stung on his paw, and it was really swollen up, and they didn't find a stinger or they didn't find a bite site, but they could tell that there was something wrong with it. So we've been giving him antibiotics, and we're giving him a probiotic right now. He's eating normally. He kind of immediately bounced back. Right now, we're just monitoring his overall health. Looks good. The GI issue seems to have been resolved. He's eating healthily. He seems back to normal. So fingers crossed that that's all this was just some kind of weird, maybe it was like we have some burrowing wasps here in New Orleans. So it's possible that he just got stung while he was digging something up in the backyard, because we do take him out in the backyard ever so often. But fingers crossed he's okay, and he's going to be here for a very, very long time. But we are always keeping an eye on him. If you got value out of this video, please give it a like. It makes a huge difference to the channel. And of course, subscribe for more cool PC content. Like, did you check out our best CPU to buy in March 2026? You want a deeper dive on the Intel versus AMD CPUs right here, or the best GPU to buy in March 2026? Check them out, and we'll catch you on the next one.